أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار يا حي يا قيوم برحمتك أستغيث لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك إني كنت من الظالمين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. So yesterday we finished from verse 40 to verse 54. Today we're going to continue from verse 55. So, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ قلتم يا موسى لن نؤمن لك حتى نرى الله جهرة فأخذتكم الصاعقة وأنتم تنظرون ثم بعثناكم من بعد موتكم لعلكم تشكرون وظللنا عليكم الغمام وأنزلنا عليكم المن والسلوى كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم وما ظلمونا ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون وإذ قلنا أدخلوا هذه القرية فكلوا منها حيث شئتم رغدا وادخلوا الباب سجدا وقولوا حتات نغفر لكم خطاياكم وسنزيد المحسنين فبدل الذين ظلموا قولا غير الذي قيل لهم فأنزلنا على الذين ظلموا رجزا من السماء بما كانوا يفسقون صدق الله العظيم. I think I made a slight mistake here in verse 59. Qayla. Qila, is it Qila or Qayla? It's not good. Verse 59. Let's make sure we get this pronunciation correct. I'm going with Qayla. Qila. 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 Okay, so this approximates to English as, and remember you said, O Moses, we shall never believe in thee until we see Allah manifestly, but we were dazed by thunder and lightning even as you looked on. And then we raised you up after your death. You had the chance to be grateful, and we gave you the shade of clouds and sent down to you manna. This is interesting. Manna and quails, saying, eat of the good things we have provided for you. But they rebelled. To us they did no harm, but they harmed their own souls. And remember we said, enter this town and eat of the plenty therein, as you wish, but enter the gate with humility, in posture and in words, and we shall forgive you for your faults and increase the portion of those who do good. But the transgressors changed the word from that which had been given to them. So we sent on the transgressors a plague from heaven, for that they infringed our command repeatedly. A plague from heaven. How can heaven have a plague? That does not really make sense. I mean, plague from heaven. I need to understand why that is the case. Plague from heaven makes no sense. Okay, so I was once reading about truffles. Truffles are these rock-like edible. Is it a fruit? Truffle, fruit or herb? I think it's a fruit. A truffle is a fruity body of a fungus. This is according to Gemini AI. So it's technically a type of mushroom. Truffles are underground fungi that grow in symbiotic relationship with tree roots. Fascinating. So I read this in the context of manna, as this ayah mentions. Al-manna wa salwa. So, and quails. So quails are these very majestic yet small looking birds. And I say majestic because if you actually look at their pattern, especially the Californian quail has like a, if you Google Californian quail, as mentioned in ayah 57 of Surah Al-Baqarah, it has a very distinct feature, and just by looking at it, you can tell it's a very meaty bird, right? But anyway, I was looking at truffles, right? And I came across one of Routledge's book on a companion to the Quran, and is explaining in detail why Allah sent manna, truffles, which is a fruit which reacts to the roots of the tree and it becomes a fungus. So it's a type of mushroom actually. So it's like a fruit mushroom hybrid sort of thing going on. Subhanallah. And then quails are these birds that, as I mentioned, small, but in my view, very majestic, because they're mentioned in the Quran. So that trumps most other birds. And now Allah is saying that we send these things for provision provided to you, but they rebelled. Bani Israel rebelled. They were like, we don't like this. This is horrible. We don't want this. And then Allah says in ayah 57, to us they did no harm, but they harmed their own souls. So this tells me when we are ungrateful for any good or bad that Allah sends. Now, I'm not saying Allah sends in the sense where He has a bag and He's dropping things, a'udhu billah. Or neither am I anthropomorphizing. Anthropomorphism means to make a inanimate object animate. So for example, this pencil, this will start jumping and laughing in cartoons, for example, right? So that's not what I'm obviously doing here. What I'm suggesting is that when Bani Israel disrespected Allah, once Allah sent them down truffles and these birds, they harmed their own souls. Now this makes me think that when iron, because we know iron, right, hadid, is sent down from heaven, and as it's sent down from heaven, we also know that it's out of this world and it cannot be produced synthetically. So when we drive these cars and utilize other forms of iron, for example, and we discard them and just throw them in the bin, and we don't respect iron because iron is from heaven, from Jannah, We are wronging ourselves. That's just my opinion. This is again disclaimer. Should have mentioned at the beginning. Disclaimer here is that this is not tafsir. This is not a dars in a sense. This is just me reciting the ayahs of Surah Al-Baqarah and reading Abdullah Yusuf Ali's approximation of the Quran, though he is controversial because he has different views on heaven and hell. He's dead now, so we can't say much. Anyway, so Ayah 57, Manna. Let's see what Abdullah Yusuf Ali has to say. Manna is Hebrew word. Manhu is, Mahua in Arabic means what is this? Mahua. In Exodus, Book of Exodus, chapter 16, verse 14, it is described as a small round thing, as small as the hoar frost on the ground. What's a hoar frost? Hoar, frost. Hoar frost is a white or silver frost that forms on objects when water vapor in the air freezes. It looks like the feathery ice needles or scales that is often found on tree branches, leaves, and grasses. Okay. Fascinating. Right, so okay, so now here's a reference of Surah Al-Araf, Ayah 160 as well. Further states it usually rotted if left over till next day. It melted in the hot sun. The amount necessary for each man was about an omer, a Hebrew measure of capacity equal to 2.5 quarts. So omer in Hebrew language is equal to 2.5 quarts. What's a quarts? Never heard of quarts measurement. Quarts measurement. A quarts is a unit of measurement for volume or capacity that is used in the US and British imperial systems. It is equal to a quarter of a gallon. So make me understand this in liters. 2.5 quarts in liters. 2.3 liters. So this is 1.5. So I would say about this much, right? So each person was given about 2.4 liters. 2.4 liters. Okay. And this is the Hebrew account, probably distorted by traditional exaggeration, of course. The actual manna found to this day in the Sinai region is a gummy saccharine secretion found on a species of tamarisk. Tamarisk. Ooh. Okay. Guess I have to go to the Sinai and see this for myself. Tamarisk. Tamarisk is a flowering shrub or small tree with feathery foliage and small pink or white flowers. Wow. It's quite some plant, tamarisk. And it says gummy saccharine. Saccharine, I think it means sweet. Gummy saccharine. Secretion. Tamarisk. Interesting. So the tamarisk is a plant that's found in the Sinai, and from that Allah gave a special kind of truffles to Bani Israel. The astonishing thing is that we've read these verses, came across them many times, but we choose to just simply be like, you know what, just read them over. it makes me think, why this specific fruit and why this specific animal? There must be some hikmah, something about it. Fascinating. So, a lot of botany being spoken about here, but it's fine, I guess. It is produced by the puncture of a species of insect like the cochineal, just as lac is produced by the puncture of the lac insect in certain trees in India. Right, okay, so now what is cochineal? Cochineal. Cochineal. Oh, wow. Cochineal is a scale insect in the suborder Sternor, Sternor, Sternorhinca, from which the natural dye carmine is derived, a primary sessile parasite native to the tropical and subtropical South America through North Africa. This insect lives on cacti in the genus Opuntia, feeding on plant moisture and nutrients. So it's pretty subhanallah, crazy that an insect produces this secretion. How did man discover this? It's incredible. That's why I'm of the opinion that ancient civilizations were far advanced than modern civilizations, for sure. As to quails, large flights of them are driven by winds in the eastern Mediterranean in certain seasons of the year, as was witnessed during the Great War of 1914 to 1918. So, migration of quails, Great War 1914 to 1918. So, of course, I'm going to study about bird migration because birds are one of my favorite animals, class of animals. Quail migration of birds. Meshi. So, next we have ayah 58. And remember, we said, enter this town and eat of the plenty therein as you wish, but enter the gate with humility, which a lot of these tiny hat coin clippers do not have anymore. In posture and in words, and we shall forgive you your faults and increase the portion of those who do good. So Allah says, enter this town. This is how I'm thinking about it. When these immigrants, Bani Israel, entered this town, Allah said, have good posture, not necessarily meaning in terms of the structure of the back muscles, but it's implied that you have good posture, you have confidence in what Allah is about to give you. And in business terminology, when you say because I'm part of security SaaS, software as a service sales, so when I used to be in this industry, we would use terms like, how's your security posture? Now, of course, softwares don't have a posture per se, but it's another term in terms of confidence, valor meaning courage you have when a threat is imminent, or when a threat is expected, or even if it's unexpected, how are you equipped software wise? So here, go into the town, Allah said to these Jews at the time, and have humility in posture and in words, and we shall forgive you and your faults and increase the portion of those who do good. You know, there is a Sahih hadith that of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that any Muslim that migrates from one country to another for the sake of Allah, i.e. hijrah, his past sins are forgiven. I'm not saying it's the same case here, just remind me of that hadith. And Allah says, and increase the portion of those who do good. Now, I'm intrigued to know what Abdullah Yusuf Ali says here, because he mentioned Surah Al-Araf earlier when talking about measurements of the truffles that Bani Israel were given, because they were given the shade of the clouds, and during the tough times they were given truffles and they were given birds as nutrients. Okay, and Surah Al-Araf ayah 160 is mentioned, and here I can see ayah 161 and 162 being mentioned here. So let's check this out. So ayah 58, according to Abdullah Yusuf Ali, this probably refers to Shittim. It was the town of Acacius, just east of the Jordan, where the Israelites were guilty of debauchery and the worship of and sacrifices to false gods. Book of Numbers, chapter 25, verses 1 to 2, and also verses 8 to 9. A terrible punishment ensued, including the plague, of which 24,000 died. I bet some of these coin clipping tiny hat people claim it would be 6 million. The word which the transgressors changed may have been a password. May have been a password. So it's a particular phrase used to enter this town. So, for example, when you go to certain private members clubs and certain places that regular people can't go to, there's a passcode, there's a dress code. They know who you are by your posture and your words. So that's what's being indicated here. When you enter this town, make sure you look the part and speak the part as Allah has said. For example, you go to certain parts of London, there's a certain posture and style of how people speak, and you know they're from a certain sort or certain class. I don't like to use the word class, but a certain class of people. Then there's another side of London where it's complete opposite. So fascinating. The word which the transgressors changed may have been a password. In the Arabic text, it is hittatun. The Arabic word is hittatun, ha ta ta marbuta. Okay, which implies humility and a prayer of forgiveness. Okay, interesting. A fitting emblem to distinguish them from their enemies. Humility and prayer of forgiveness. From this particular incident, a more general lesson may be drawn. In the hour of triumph, we are to behave humbly as in Allah's sight, and our conduct should be exemplary according to Allah's word. Otherwise, our arrogance will draw its own punishment. These verses 58 to 59, okay, may be compared with Surah Al-Araf, chapter 7, verses 161 and 162. There are two verbal differences here. In verse 58, we have enter the town, and in verse 161 of chapter 7, we have dwell in this town. Again, in verse 59, here we have infringed our command. In verse 162 of chapter 7, we have transgressed. The verbal differences make no difference to the sense. Yeah, so that's the beauty of language, right? One word can have the same effect, same potency within the sentence. So let's check out Surah Al-Araf 160 to 162. (160 to 162). Okay, here we go. 160, 161, and 162. Okay, so let's fix this. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقطعناه وقطعناه مثنتا عشرة أسباطا أمامة وأوحينا إلى موسى إذ استسقاه قومه أن اضرب بعصاك الحجر فانبجست منه اثنتا عشرة عينا قد علم كل أناس مشربهم وظللنا عليهم الغمام وأنزلنا عليهم المن والسلوى. Oh, here it is once again. كلوا من طيبات ما رزقناكم وما ظلمونا ولكن كانوا أنفسهم يظلمون وإذ قيل لهم اسكنوا هذه القرية وكلوا منها حيث شئتم وقولوا حتات وادخلوا الباب سجدا نغفر لكم خطيئاتكم سنزيد المحسنين فبدل الذين ظلموا منهم قولا غير الذي قيل لهم فأرسلنا عليهم رجزا من السماء بما كانوا يظلمون. صدق الله العظيم. So this approximates to English as in the following. Verse 160. We have divided them into 12 tribes. Okay. Into 12 tribes or nations. We directed Moses by inspiration when his thirsty people asked him for water. Strike the rock with thy staff. Out of it there gushed forth 12 springs. Wow, 12 springs. Why 12? Something about the number 12. Each group knew its own place for water. We gave them the shade of clouds and sent down to them manna and quails, saying, Eat of the good things until we have provided for you. But they rebelled. To us, they did no harm, but they harmed their own souls. Right, so we can clearly see the theme, in a sense, being repeated. No, sorry, repeated, being followed through here. Right, so it's interesting how 12 tribes of Bani Israel were given clouds as shade, they were given maya, water from the rocks, they were given truffles, special kind of mushrooms, effectively fruity mushrooms, quails, and Allah said, eat of these good things we provided for you, but they rebelled, most likely complained and said, we're not interested in any of this. And Allah says they did no harm, but they harmed their own souls. And clearly, we are all guilty of this. I am certainly. So, reference here goes back to Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 57. And also it says here Surah Taha, verse 81. Right, we'll check that out in a moment. Next is verse 161. And remember, it was said to them, dwell in this town and eat therein as you wish, but say the word of humility and enter the gate in a posture of humility. We shall forgive you your faults. We shall increase the portion of those who do good. I mean, it makes sense. Those who do good and do their best at doing good ultimately are victorious. How can you be an athlete and not train, but be considered an athlete of any sort, amateur, professional, or elite? An athlete, by definition, has to exercise twice a day, look after their health, train, compete at a low level, then slowly go to a higher level, and so on. Likewise, people who will do good, i.e., obey Allah, at the smallest to the biggest level. Smallest level, could be the smallest level. Brushing your teeth. Brushing your teeth, looking after yourself, cleanliness, hygiene, all the way to the bigger things where you're control of a country now. How do you serve your people? You're head of a massive company. How do you serve the people that work with you and for you and benefit the community? So it's the greater good. There's this concept in Western philosophy called the greater good. So the whole idea is not based, but one of the tenets of the idea is based off of the greater good, meaning majority of people benefit at the expense of the destruction of a few. So if, for example, some children in Congo have to be sacrificed through child labor so we can have these smart devices and electric cars and have these minerals that also now exist in Ukraine, supposedly been found there. Some Eastern European, Caucasian looking, Russian speaking, Ukrainian speaking men have to die, and politicians launder their money through weapon contracts and other type of contracts. So be it. The greater good is that civilization is running with the lithium, for example, and the cobalt that is coming out of the ground. So it's morally justified to serve greater majority of the people in good and destroy a few people. But it's never the case, you see, because the more innovation, the more consumerist society becomes, the more exploitation is needed. It's what in English you can say is a vicious cycle. It keeps going and going and going and going and going and going and going. That seems to be the theme with Bani Israel. They kept going through these challenges because they were disrespecting Allah, as I mentioned yesterday, and I actually forgot to mention the second reason. First reason was they disrespected Isa al-Islam. Separate video as to the whole idea of Isa al-Islam. Second was when they disrespected Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They tried attempting to end his life. They disrespected the Muslim women. They broke contracts and peace treaties. They were two-faced, disgusting people, just like today. So, regarding Ayah 161, dwell in this town and eat. Abdullah Yusuf Ali says, as in Ayah 19 of Surah Al-Araf, we may construe eat here to mean not only eating literally, but enjoy the good things in life. Okay, interesting. Next is Ayah 162. But the transgressors among them changed the word from that which had been given them, which had been given to them. So we sent on them a plague from heaven, for that they repeatedly transgressed. So I don't really understand why Allah sent a plague from heaven, because heaven is not an area where there's death and disease. So let's see what Abdullah Yusuf Ali says here. In reference to Surah Al-Baqarah, ayah 58 and 59, the story is here told by way of parable for the times of Islam. Hence, we have a few verbal changes. Example given: dwell in this town instead of enter this town. Okay, so he's talking about the town. I'm not sure what is meant by a plague from heaven. Okay, take a note of this. Actually, plague from heaven. We have Surah Al-Araf 162 and Surah Al-Baqarah ayah number 59. So again, Surah Al-Araf, where Musa alayhi salam hits his staff, and there's water coming out. That is repeated here. I just glanced on this. Ayah number 60. So I think so far we've covered quite a lot here. And 37 minutes on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 ayahs in 40 minutes. SubhanAllah. And I struggled a bit actually reciting Surah Al-Araf. So clearly, I need to improve a lot. I'm actually going to read these ayahs again at some point. So, moving forward, we will now move to ayah 60. And this is a very extensive explanation by Abdullah Yusuf Ali. So we'll finish at ayah 61. I think at ayah 61, that'll be enough for today. And, you know, even if we don't finish this surah this week, or we don't finish the entire Quran in Ramadan in this manner, I'm satisfied to the degree that I attempted. And on the Day of Judgment, inshallah, may our scales be heavier on the good side compared to the bad side. Ameen. Allahumma ajirni minan nar. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وإذ استسقى موسى لقومه فقلنا اضرب بعصاك الحجر فانفجرت منه اثنتا عشرة عينا قد علم كل أناس مشربهم كلوا واشربوا من رزق الله ولا تعثوا في الأرض مفسدين وإذ قلتم يا موسى لن نصبر على طعام واحد فادع لنا ربك يخرج لنا مما تنبت الأرض من بقلها وقصائها وفومها وعدسها وبصالها قال أتستبدلون الذي هو أدنى بالذي هو خير أهبطوا مصرا فإن لكم ما سألتم وضربت عليهم الذلة والمسكنة وباءوا بغضب من الله ذلك بأنهم كانوا يكفرون بآيات الله ويقتلون النبيين بغير الحق ذلك بما عصوا وكانوا يعتدون. صدق Allah al-Azim. So, chapter 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, verses 60, 61. There's a lot of information, historical information in particular, packed in these ayats. So, what I'll do is make a small note here. Make a small note, but I need my notings to put here. Okay, so Surah Al-Araf seems to play a very pivotal role in terms of the continuation of the reality of Bani Israel entering a town, having clouds over them. So these were signs of Allah, obviously signs of mercy. Clouds over them, truffles, birds, fresh water for the 12 tribes that were there, and there were 12 springs. Fascinating. Surah Al-Araf. And then we are looking at verses 162. 162. Okay. So, verse 60 approximates to, and remember Moses prayed for water for his people. We said, strike the rock with thy staff. Then gushed forth therefrom 12 springs. Each group knew its own place for water. So eat and drink of the sustenance provided by Allah. And do no evil nor mischief on the face of the earth. And remember, he said, O Moses, we cannot endure one kind of food always. So beseech thy Lord for us, to produce for us of what the earth groweth, its pot herbs and cucumbers, its garlic, lentils, and onions. Tasty. He said, will you exchange the better for the worse? Go ye down to any town, and you shall find what you want. They were covered with humiliation and misery. Wow. They drew on themselves the wrath of Allah, this because they went on rejecting the signs of Allah and slaying His messengers without just cause. This because they rebelled and went on transgressing. Right, so we have quite a lot of historical references here, as you can imagine. And these historical references are extremely important to understand why they requested this type of food, why Allah helped them instantly in a sense, and why Musa alayhi salam told them to essentially get away from me and go to the town, and they were humiliated. So, Ayah 60, Surah Al-Baqarah, according to Abdullah Yusuf Ali, he says, here we have a reference to the tribal organization of the Jews, which played a great part in their 40 years march through the Arabian deserts. Book of Numbers, chapter 1 and 2. And the subsequent settlement in the land of Canaan. Book of Joshua, chapter 13, 14. The 12 tribes were derived from the sons of Yaqub, whose name was changed to Israel, soldier of Allah, after he had wrestled, says Jewish tradition, with Allah. You know, that is true. The disgusting Yahudi believe that Astaghfirullah, Yaqub alayhi salam had a wrestling match with Allah. And because of that, his name's Israel, which is their conception of Israel, soldier of Allah. I would like someone from this tradition or whoever believes in this nonsense to justify how can Yaqub alayhi salam have a wrestling match with Allah. Can someone explain to me how Yaqub alayhi salam had a wrestling match with Allah? Say it once again. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, assuming we're alive, you could probably get some answer. Why did Yaqub alayhi salam, according to the nasty Jews, the coin clipping, tiny hat people, according to them, why did Yaqub, Jacob have a wrestling match with Allah? And how is that possible? Even if it was in Jannah, if it was in his dream, whatever the scenario, how is it possible? Pathetic. That's why I don't trust these coin clipping people at all. I'll sit down and do some type of secular conversation, business, for example, if need be, although avoid it at all costs. If they're interested in the deen, have a conversation regarding the deen. And for them, Islam is a secular thing because A'udhu Billah, they see Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as a deviant, as a Dajjal, someone who did Dajjal, right? The false Messiah, astaghfirullah. Same way they view Isa alayhi salam, these tiny hat, coin clipping people. And doesn't matter how much of the world they control, Salesforce, Dettol, HP, Oracle, Microsoft, X, every single thing in your room and on your phone and in your phone is controlled by them. But despite that, they are humiliated. No one's impressed. Everyone knows their history. You know, one thing I'll mention, the reason I say coin clipping people is because the ridges of a coin were introduced in England because they would break a piece of the gold or silver and keep it and keep it and keep it and keep on accumulating and accumulating it. Sanity. Anyway, so Book of Genesis, okay, chapter 32, verse 28. So, Book of Genesis, chapter 32, verse 28. Jacob wrestles with God. Astaghfirullah. So, Israel had 12 sons, including Levi and Joseph. The descendants of these 12 sons were the children of Israel. Levi's family got the priesthood and the care of the tabernacle. They were exempted from military duties for which the census was taken. Right, okay. And therefore, from the distribution of land in Canaan, from the distribution of the land of Canaan, book of Joshua, chapter 14, verse 3, they were distributed among all the tribes and were really a privileged caste and not numbered among the tribes. Moses and Aaron belonged to the house of Levi. On the other hand, Joseph, on account of the high position to which he rose in Egypt as the Pharaoh's minister, was the progenitor of the two tribes, one in the name of each of his two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. So Yusuf and Levi were two separate. Joseph, Yusuf, and Levi were two separate. And Musa and Harun belonged to Levi's house, his lineage. And Yusuf alayhi salam had two other sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. I've never come across these names in the Islamic tradition. There must be something going on. Thus, there were 12 tribes in all, as Levi was cut out and Joseph represented two tribes. There having fixed stations and watering places in camp and fixed territorial areas, late in the promised land prevented confusion and mutual jealousies, and is pointed to as an evidence of the providence of Allah acting through his prophet Musa alayhi salam. Okay, so according to Abdullah Yusuf Ali, he says, thus there were 12 tribes in all, as Levi was cut out and Yusuf represented two tribes. There having fixed stations and watering places in camp and fixed territorial areas late in the promised land prevented confusion and mutual jealousies, and is pointed to as an evidence of the providence of Allah acting through his prophet Musa alayhi salam. The gushing 12 springs from a rock evidently refers to a local tradition well known to Jews and Arabs in Al-Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time, near Horeb, close to Mount Sinai, Tur Sina, where the law was given to Moses, is a huge mass of red granite, 12 feet high and about 50 feet in circumference, where European travelers, example given Bredenbach in 15th century, after 15 centuries after Isa Islam, saw abundant springs of water, 12 in number. See George Sells' notes on this passage. Wow, so he's really gone in with the references here. Louvet. So George Sell wrote the first translation of the Quran in the Western world. And funny enough, he was anti-Islam and anti-Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yet he translated the whole Quran. So, pretty astonishing, one would think, but again, Allah guides who he wills. It existed in Al-Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam's time and may still exist to the present day, for anything we know to the contrary. The Jewish tradition would be based on Book of Exodus, chapter 17, verse 6. Thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, that the people may drink. Interesting. The story is used as a parable, as is clear from the latter part of the verse. In the desolation and among the rocks of this life, people grumble, but they will not be left starving or thirsty of spiritual life. Allah's Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, can provide, sorry, alayhi salam, can provide abundant spiritual sustenance even from such uncompromising things as the hard rocks of life. Hmm. This is the most powerful non-Quranic line of tonight. I'll read it again. Allah's Messenger can provide abundant spiritual sustenance even from such uncompromising things as the hard rocks of life. And all the nations can be grouped round it, each different, yet each in perfect order and discipline. We are to use with gratitude all spiritual food and drink provided by Allah, and He sometimes provides from unexpected places. We must restrain ourselves from mischief, pride, and every kind of evil, for our higher life is based on our probation on this very earth. Yeah, so this life is a probation. This is a probationary period, let's say for, I don't know, 80, 90, 100 years max. Alhamdulillah. But the life to come is far more real than real can describe real. I guess we'll leave it at that for now. We will come back to ayah 61 and speak about Egypt, my favorite country in the whole world, and more about the Jewish tribes and the history and everything else. May Allah forgive me for any wrong recitation, as most of you have obviously saw. I was struggling a bit. Subhanallah. And we improve always to the best of our ability. Till next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.